The Anthropology of Food and Body. This book is written by Carol Cooney. She has written a lot of books that relate to anthropology, food, and culture. Other books that she has written are Around the Tuscan Table, Food, Family, and Gender in the 20th Century, Florence, A Tortillas Like Life, Food and Culture in the St. Louis Valley, Colorado. This book is nonfiction. The intended audience are the people who are interested in anthropology, gender power relations, and want to learn about the relationship between food, culture, and body. The author of this book focuses on food, power, and gender. In the Anthropology of Food and Body, Carol Cooney uses cross-cultural perspective to understand specific food practices and behaviors and its impact on body, gender relations, women, relationship between mother and her child, and gender development in children. The author mainly focuses on women and talks about inequality that they face because of food, discusses eating disorders and gender differences. She emphasizes how the roles of cooking, eating, and feeding define identities and relationships of men and women in a family. Through this book, the author wants to create a change and encourages more equal and mutually empowering gender relationship in regard to food. So one of the topics that she talks about are food and power and how food behaviors impact body, gender relations, and women. When the author talks about food and power, she talks about how when a woman gains weight, men make them feel insecure by judging their weight and amount of food that they eat. The author witnessed this when one female student reported that this in her food journal. The female student was talking about how her father was dissatisfied with her and her diet. This was a research that she did in college to research about the relationship younger generation students have with food. So she made them write in food journals and like what they think about food and in a food related class that they were taking. Through this, she wants to show the power men have over women by having the right to judge them just because of the amount of food they eat, which is not considered normal. This also shows how food impacts gender relations and creates inequality, as women cannot say the same things to men because men can eat however much they want to show power and authority through their muscles and big belly. If a woman eats a lot, then that is not viewed as a good thing because women are expected to eat little. The author tries to show the inequality that occurs because of food through people when they're expected to follow a certain food practices or behaviors according to their gender. Impact of food behaviors in US and the Samoa. This was a cross-cultural perspective. Hoonihan compares women in different societies and how women in Italy and the Samoa take weight gain as a normal thing and an unavoidable part of their life, whereas in US, obesity is not taken positively. So in the Samoa, when asked women about their weight, they were pretty content with their weight. They didn't really care. Versus in the United States, if a female is not fit, then they are not looked at upon, as in it portrays that they do not have power if they're overweight. They're often like overlooked. Through this, the author wants to show how women are treated in diverse societies, illustrates how they have to meet certain societal standards to avoid negative societal gaze. These things lead to eating disorders in women because of the judgment they receive. The eating disorders she talks about are bulimia, anorexia. She also talks about obesity and how that leads to eating disorders. And she also talks about how if a female is fit, then they have like a higher status versus women who are not as fit are like not looked at upon in a good way, as in like when I said they do not have power. Impact food has on relationship between mother and her child and gender development. The author emphasizes breastfeeding and how by providing, serving, and cooking food for her kids, a mother is able to build connection with her children. Through this, the author wants to show that when a child is not provided with food, it creates a discomfort. So when the mother gives food to the child, it creates a source of pleasure. This creates an attachment to the mother. Through this, the portrayal, the author shows that relationship mother has with her children through food. Further talks about gender development in kids through kids' stories. So this was another research that she did in elementary school where she asked kids to tell her stories, and based on their stories, she connected her ideas of their relationship with food. One girl talked about how her mother and her went out for a picnic, but there was nothing in the basket because there was a hole in it. So then they tied the basket and put food in it. So this was one girl's story. And through this story, the author wants to show gender differences that develop with what kids see around them. And through their stories, they depict what girls are more likely to do. Like in this story, the girl makes references to food, picnics, and cookouts.
So now we're going to talk about the strengths and evidence of the evidence and the thesis. So the strength is that this book explores many areas of food and what roles it plays for people at different stages of their life, especially for women. The essays in every chapter are written based on the data that the author and her colleagues collected from research in multiple different countries, such as Sardinia, Florence, and the United States, of course, as well as many others. The use of cross-cultural data and perspective that is observed is true. So basically, the author is supporting all of her arguments with all of the data that she's collected over these many years. She also talks about the variety of perspectives on how foodways challenge and enforce social inequality in family and society. And the author also looks at gender development in children through a research that she does with elementary kids and college students as well. And it connects it to what they observe reveals about food practices and behavior for specific genders. Now we're going to talk about the weaknesses of the evidence and its thesis. The author has a very feministic approach to the book. Throughout the whole thing, she really is only focusing on the women's perspective rather than the male and women perspective. This is a very progressive book for its time, however, so that is a pro within this weakness. As I stated before, there's a lot more data gathered focused mainly on females. When it talks about the effect of food practices and the behaviors that have on gender, it is mainly focusing on females rather than both men and women. There wasn't a whole lot of balance between the both genders. It was very heavily influenced by the female perspective rather than the male perspective. It talks about the inequalities that women face. For example, when talking about eating disorders, she focuses more on how important the impacts there are on women than men. Our overall evaluation, the book provided a very strong insight of the importance of food and the effects it has on our bodies, society, and our lives just in general. The author introduces topics such as eating disorders, the patriarchy, female oppression, and beauty standards, as well as many other different important to discuss topics. These topics that were given throughout the book allow the author to show how food acts more than just a source of energy for the body. It has a much deeper level of understanding. The book appealed to us readers in both a logical and emotional form. Many of the examples and evidences used throughout the book could be comparable to people's everyday lives. For example, the author talks a lot about body dysmorphia or just food issues throughout the world, eating disorders, for example. And this is talked a lot about throughout multiple different chapters, and it's something that we see every single day, especially throughout social media. The stories that were explained throughout the book showed that there are more to food in human body than it is what on just the surface level. Our general opinion about the merits of the book: overall, the book was a very easy read, and we kept getting introduced to intriguing topics of discussion to help keep the readers interested. The individual stories definitely helped on this aspect. The author further explained to the readers how certain processes worked by using these individual stories. The topics used, though easy to understand, were interesting to see the correlation between the topic itself as well as the correlation between food or nutrition just in general. And using the nonfiction writing style allowed us readers to see how the discussion was used in real life situations, as I mentioned before. And each chapter was about 20 to 30 pages long, very quick and easy to read, took about 10-15 minutes for each chapter. And each chapter also had at least one personalized story to go along with the topic that each chapter was discussing.